Alright, so this will be a simple demonstration in terms of how you can go about using ASP.NET to create a simple web app. Alright, and we're calling our web application WebMed. It will have the following menu tab options: home, patient list, and privacy, along with a login page and a registration page. Alright, so for this demonstration, we'll be using minimal coding, um, for the lack of a better way of terming it. Alright, so this will be our application. So if we click on patient list, we can go ahead and create or add patients to our database. Now before adding a patient, we should log in. Alright, so we'll basically build this from scratch. So let me just open Visual Studio. Alright, now that Visual Studio is up, first thing we're going to do is we are going to click on the Create New Project option right here. Alright, so we'll be using the ASP.NET Core Web Application option. Now we're using C# as our programming language, so you want to ensure that C# is selected. I have the All Platforms option selected as well, and the Web option selected also. Alright, so we're going to click on ASP.NET Core Web Application, then click Next. Alright, so I'm going to now name my application, and as I said, we're going to call it WebMed. Alright, or web.med. I'm going to select my location where I want to save. So on my desktop, I have a folder called demo. So I'm going to select the demo folder right there to save our new web application. Then we click on create. Alright, now once that is done, we're taken to another screen where we're going to select whether we want to use an empty project, if we want to build an API, a web application, or a web application using the model view controller. Right, and I'll speak a little bit about model view controller shortly. Right, now very important is the authentication. Now we want to use minimal coding or write as little code as possible. So I'm going to use this authentication option here to basically create the registration and the login pages for us. So I'm going to click change, and currently it is saying no authentication. Now to add authentication to our web application, we're going to use individual user accounts. There are additional options, for example, work or school accounts and Windows authentication, but the one for us at this moment is the individual user accounts. Just click on OK. Just ensure that we select web application with the model view controller, and then we're going to click on create. Alright, now once that is done, you should be given the following, alright, in Visual Studio. Now this is our out of the box application. Over to our right on the Solution Explorer, you'll see a number of folders. Alright, now one folder is called the Models folder. There's another folder called the Controllers folder, and there's also a folder called the Views folder. Now the views folder will contain the pages that are served to the user or to the persons viewing the web application. So views are just the pages that the user will view. The models basically has to do with the data that is handled by your web application. While your controller now seeks to handle any page events or any navigation between pages. All right, so again, your view manages the display of data, which is the web page. So for example, this web page is being served to us from whatever code or file that would be contained inside our views folder. All right, while the data is being maintained inside our models folder, and the controller now is basically a link between the model or the models and the views. All right, so the controller handles page events, navigation between pages, and stuff like that. All right. All right, so let's see what our web application will look like from a basic from this basic set of code and files that were given to us. So I'm going to go to debug. Well, all right, let me just run it using this play button right here. And it is using the IIS Express server. And IIS Express is given to us from Microsoft to host web applications that we build within ASP.NET, for example, because ASP.NET web applications, they are server side, they are dynamic, right? So they depend on a server to run. All right, so let me just go ahead and click the play button and we will see what our basic web application looks like. All right, so our web application is loading. All right, and you notice here it is using localhost, which means that our web application or website is being served by a local server that is on our specific computer. All right, so once our web application loads, this is what the default will look like. All right, so there's home, privacy, login, and register. All right, so we can register for an account. And after registering for an account, we can go ahead and log in. All right, now if we click on home, this is what our home page looks like. So let's first of all go back to Visual Studio and basically make some adjustments to our home page. All right, that will be the first thing. All right, so in order to make some changes, let's just stop the application from running. All right, now recall that I had mentioned the views folder is where the pages that we are actually looking on, that's where the pages are basically stored. All right, so first things first, what I want to do is to go to views, then click on the home folder. Now inside the home folder, you will see an index file and also a privacy file. So the index file is actually the home page as shown here, all right? And the privacy file is where the privacy page is being served up from. Now, you realize it says .cshtml, and that is what is referred to as a razor file in Microsoft or in ASP.NET. All right. So let's make some changes to our index page or index file first of all. Alright, let me just go back to debug and let me now start our application without debugging. So currently this is what our application looks like. Alright. Now let's make some adjustments to our code here. Alright, so instead of saying welcome, let's change this to web.med. Alright, let's take out this bit of default information. And let's, for example, say welcome. Alright, so let's say welcome to web.med online application. And that should be good enough. Alright, so if we should save this. Alright, so let's save. Go back to our website, refresh, and we realize now it is saying web.med, welcome to web.med online application. Alright, now let's put a picture on this to kind of fill this blank space right here. So we're going to put an image. Alright, now very important, our www root section right here is where we host things like our CSS files or JavaScript files. Alright, so this is a good place as well to store the images that we'll be using for our web application. So I'm going to right click on the www root and I'm going to add a folder. So I'm going to go to add new folder. I'm going to call this folder img, store our image. Alright, I'm going to now grab an image. So there's an image on my desktop. So let me just navigate to desktop. I'm going to drag this image into our image folder. Alright. Now, in order to place the image on our home page, we're going to use simple HTML tag. Alright, so we're going to use the image tag, the HTML image tag. Alright, so we're going to type img. We want to set the source. So the source. Alright, so the source, so there are some suggestions here. So we want to go to the image folder and then we want to include the image. I'm going to put some alternate text just in case our image does not load. So this will say doctor. Let's just say made doctor. Alright. And let's just close off our image tag. Let's just save again. Go back to our home page, refresh. Alright, and after refreshing, you realize our image was now placed on our home page. Alright, so as simple as that. Alright, so let's go back to Visual Studio now. Now let's just close this to get some space. The next thing we want to do is to basically add something to our application that will allow us to store the first name and the last name for a patient. All right. Now, the first thing that we need to do is to create a new class inside our models folder. Now, remember again, the models in model view controller or the models in MVC is responsible for handling the data, right? Or essentially the starting point for us handling the data. So I'm going to right click on the models folder. I'm going to go to add, then new item, and then I'm going to add a class, and I'm going to rename this to patient. Alright, so the name of our new class is patient. I'm just going to click add, and it created a new class for us. Now we need two categories of things inside our class. So we need properties for the first name and the last name, and we need a constructor as well for our class. All right. So let's create a property first of all for our first name. So I'm going to use the shortcuts. I'm going to type prop and press tab twice, and it gives us a default property. All right, you know what? Let's first create an ID for our patient. So let's create an ID first of all. So I'm going to call this ID. And again, if you remember, in terms of C sharp, or if you're not familiar with C sharp code that much, when you're creating properties, there must be a get and there must be a set. And it should be public as well. All right. All right, let's now go ahead and create a property for our first name. So let's make it a string. And let's just say first name. And let's do the same for last name. Let's make this a string. Let's make this last name. Right. Alright, so we have one property to handle the ID, another property to handle first name, and a property as well to handle the patient's last name. Alright, so let's create a constructor now. And if you don't know anything about constructors and you're using object-oriented programming, in a nutshell, the constructor is used to initialize what we call objects. Alright, so our constructor is very important inside of our class. So let's create a constructor. Again, let's use the shortcut CTOR tab, and that created our constructor for us. Alright, I'm just going to save this. Alright, so we don't need to use this currently, but we'll soon make reference to this particular class that we just created. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is, with the help of our controller, we're going to create a few pages. Now let me just show you what those pages will be. Alright, so the pages will be a patient list page, page 2, well, you won't be seeing it now because I need to log in first, but essentially there will be a page to also create your patient list and as well as delete and edit your patient list. So we're going to use, with the help of the controller, we're going to create those pages. Alright, so let's just go back to our Visual Studio. So let me just close this to get some space. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to right click on the controllers folder, and just to point out, the controllers folder, it already contains one C# file called home controllers. Alright, so we're going to now create a patient controller that will be tied to our patient class right here. Alright, so let's just right click on controllers. We're going to add, and we want to add a controller. Alright, now there are multiple options in terms of us adding a controller. You want to go with the option that will give us the most assistance in terms of minimal coding again. Right, we're not running away from the coding, but we are just utilizing what is available to us. Alright, so for that reason, we're going to select the third option on the list here that says MVC controller with views using entity framework. Now, entity framework is basically what they refer to as an ORM, or an object relational mapper. Alright, so if you would have ever heard persons talk about object relational databases and stuff like that, the entity framework would sort of fall in that category. Alright, so it assists us in handling our data, but it also feeds to us certain pages that the data will be handled on. Alright, so we're going to select the third option, click on add. Alright, now there are some very important things that we need to add. Alright, so first of all, we need to add a model class, and the model class that we're going to be adding is the one that we just created a short while ago, that we call patient. Alright, so we're going to look for that. So it says patient web.med models, so that's the one that we want to use. Alright, now very important as well is for us to select a data context class. Alright, if we click this drop down, by default we are seeing application DB context. Now when we are adding our data context class, it must include this application DB context. Alright, so instead of selecting this, I'm just going to click on the plus icon here, or the plus button, and it basically gives us in a nutshell what our name, or the name for our context type, should be. Now the important thing is, where it's highlighted in blue here, we need to type over that and say application DB uppercase D lowercase b context. Alright, and we want to add that. Now once we went ahead and did that, just ensure that for views, we are going to generate views, reference script libraries, and use a layout page. Now this is where the create, the patient list page, and all of that will be created for us. And those views, or those pages, will now be tied to the patient class. Alright, so let's click on add. Alright, so it's building out the different pages for us. Alright, so once these pages are finished building out, what we will have is a case like this, where if we click on create new, it will give us this create page. Alright, you can go back to the list, and so it will give us these additional pages. Alright, so let's just go back to Visual Studio. Alright, so the next thing we want to do now is to create a database to store the patient's ID, first name, and also last name. Alright, so we're going to use the package manager console to assist us in building out our SQL Server database. Alright, so what we can do is, where it says output, if you're not seeing package manager as an option, just go to tools and you're going to see NuGet package manager. Select that option or mouse over that option and you should be seeing package manager console. Alright, so click on package manager console. Alright, now we're going to type a command to basically add a database to our application. So the command is add hyphen migration. Right, and we now need to give our database structure a name. So I'm going to say, now we need to put this in quotation because it's a string. So let's call it web med db. Right, so that's a string. Press the enter key and it will basically build out the database for us. Alright, so it told us that the build was started and the build had succeeded as well. Now to remove this database structure, all we need to do is just type remove migration. But we are not removing our structure, we want it to stay. Now we'll type one more command and then our database will be set up for us. So we're going to update the database. So we're going to type update hyphen database and then press the enter key and it says build started, build succeeded. Now we are waiting for it to say done and then we can explore the database structure along with the database table. Alright, so it's saying done. So let's explore our database structure. Alright, now to find our database, we need to go to views and look for SQL Server Object Explorer. Alright. Alright, now let's just see what is here for us. Alright, so I have two database structures currently, alright, under my SQL Server. So let's see what these are. Hopefully I selected the right one. Alright, so let's look at databases. Alright. Alright, so our database is shown here. Alright. Now let's explore the table that is currently in this database. Alright, so we expand that, then we expand the tables folder. Now you should be seeing something called dbo.patient. Again, remember, this is tied to our patient model class. Right? Now let's just double click on it and see. Alright, so it generated for us a table with the current structure. It says that the ID based on this command right here, the identity, it will auto increment for us starting at 1 and our first name and last name columns were also built. All right, so let's look at that as a more of a physical structure. Let's look at the structure of it. So let's right click on the table name, then go to view data. Now currently there is no data in our table, right, which is totally okay. Soon and very soon, we will add some patient data here, namely first name and last name. So we can close this. Our database was created successfully. All right. All right. So the next thing we want to do is to add a navigation tab that will take us to our patient list. So currently, the only tabs we have here is home, privacy, and then register and login. So I want to add a tab to take us to our patient list. All right, so back in Visual Studio. All right, so again, remember views is where the pages are maintained and modified. All right, so I'm going to go to my views folder, and then in the shared folder, that is where I can find the HTML, well, the CS HTML, which is basically Razor syntax to modify our nav bar, right? Or our navigational menu. So just click on the shared folder. We should be seeing a file called layout.cshtml. That's the file we want to modify. So let's click on that. Alright, so if you look carefully, you will see a class called navbar. Alright, so that's where our navbar is being controlled from. Alright, so if we look as well, we see a class called nav item and a nav link. Right, and currently the navs that are being served by this particular page or this particular file is our home page and our privacy page. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this first nav link right here and paste that, and we're going to now modify this to link to our patient page, our patient list. All right, so first of all, I'm going to change the text that will be shown on the web page to patient list. All right, also I need to now set the ASP controller. Now remember again, we had created a controller for patients. So if we should go into our controllers folder, we will see a controller here called patients controller. All right, and that patients controller is serving up an index page for the patients um, for the patients page that will show our patient list. All right, so let's go back now to our layout. Now again, we want to change this controller right here to point us to our patient controller. So we're going to type patients. All right, so it says patients controller. So we don't need to type the entire thing in terms of patient controller. All right, that is not needed. So we just need to type patients. All right, and that for the most part, oh, that should be it. All right, so let's just save this. and go back to our website, refresh. Now, after refreshing, we are now seeing the link to our patients list. So if we click on this, it will give us this page. It is now saying index. So I want to change this to patient list as well. But it's giving us our page. We can create a new patient now, add that to our database, and so on and so forth. But let's just change this bit of text from index to patient list on our patient list page. So let's go back to Visual Studio 2019. Alright, so to modify the patient page, very important again, we must go inside the views folder, because again, the views is where the pages are stored or served from. Now, inside of the views folder here, you should be seeing a folder called patients. Alright, this was created for us automatically once we created the controller and also selected the option to generate the views for us. So let's click the drop down here. Now, inside the patients folder, we are seeing the page to create, which is this page right here. Right? We're also seeing an index page or an index file, which is providing us with this page right here. So I want to change index to patient list. So back in Visual Studio 2019, I'm going to look for that bit of code or that bit of text, and we are finding it here. So let's change this from index to patient list. Right? And if we should save this and go back to our website and refresh, all right, we realize that index has been changed to patient list. All right. All right. So let's basically try adding a patient to our database and see. So I'm going to click on create new. I'm going to type Mike and then Jones. I'm going to click on create, and that patient was created for us. Right? So we can go ahead and edit as well. So if we click on edit, there's a page for editing the patient information, and that is served to us from this file right here that is called edit.cshtml. So just to prove that, we can change this to edit patient data. All right, save. And if we should refresh, for example, which might not be a good practice to refresh where data is being handled, but as you can see, it says edit patient data. All right, so that was modified. We could make some changes. Mike J. Jones, click on save, and it now says Mike J. Jones. We can also view an individual patient's detail, and that is provided to us from this file that is called details.cshtml inside our patient folder, inside our views folder. Right, so we can edit this as well and say view patient details. Save this as well, go back and refresh, and that would have been changed as well. Right, so we can either go back to the list or patient list, or we can edit the patient detail. Let's just go back to the list. Finally, there is this delete link right here. If we click on delete, it gives us the option to delete a patient, and again, that is being provided to us from this file that is called delete inside of our patient folder, inside of our views folder. All right, so we'll not make any adjustments to the delete page. I mean, you can go ahead and do so without any issue or further instructions from me. It should be pretty straightforward. All right, so the final thing we want to do is to prevent persons from creating or adding patient detail without persons first logging in. So a user must first log in before they can go ahead and create or add any additional patients to our database. All right. So to achieve this, we're going to add some authorization to that bit of functionality. So back in Visual Studio 2019, let me just close out these to get some space. We're going to go into the controllers folder. We're going to access the patients controller.cs file. Right, we're going to look for where the create is being done. And as a matter of fact, we're going to add authorization to create, edit, and delete. Because again, you'd want to ensure that the user is an authorized user before you allow them to add data to your database, edit any data that is in your database, and also delete any data in your database. You want to ensure that anyone who is carrying out those three actions are authenticated and also authorized to do so. All right. Now, where it says I action result create, we want to add the authorization there. All right. So let's add. So let's use the authorization attribute. So that's square bracket. All right. So use a pair of square brackets. We're going to type now authorize. Now, currently this is giving us an error, and there's a suggestion. All right. Now, what this is saying is that we need to include something that will now understand what authorize is doing here. All right. So we need to include a library class and all of that to basically tell us what authorize is doing in our application. All right. So let's use the suggestion though. So just to click on the drop down arrow beside the suggestion bulb right here. Alright, so this is telling us that we can add using Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.authorization to our application. So let's go ahead with that one. Now in adding that, you realize the error has disappeared. So if we scroll up, this is what we just added to our application. Alright, so this authorization class right here. Alright, let's do the same and add authorization to some other stuff. So for example, with this HTTP post, this is what is sending the data to our database. So let's ensure that this is authorized as well. All right, let's authorize our edit. All right, the same for the post that is tied to the edit. And finally, let's authorize the delete. All right, if I can find, all right, here's the delete. All right, so this is the delete. So let's authorize that. and then authorize the post for delete as well. Right, so I'm placing the authorize above everything I want to authorize. Right, so let's save this, go back to our web page, and just hit the refresh just to ensure that we will have refreshed. Now let's click on patient list, and let's now go ahead and try to create a new patient. Now it is asking us to log in before we can go ahead and do so. Alright, now let me just add anything, or try to log in using brute force. Alright, so we're trying a brute force attack. I clicked on login. It is telling me that the login is invalid. Alright, so invalid login attempt. Now the reason for that is we did not register as a user for this application. So I'm going to register by using my email address and a very secure password, which is ABC underscore 123. To confirm, it's uppercase ABC underscore 123. And I'm going to click on register. Now, typically, if we added an email sender to our application, then this bit of information would have been sent to our email. Right? You must have seen cases where you registered for an online platform and they sent you an email for you to confirm your registration. This is doing that for us. All right. Now, no email sender has been added to this. I'm just going to click the link to confirm registration. All right. Back home. Let's try again to add a new patient. Now we must log in this time around. Right, log in. And now we can go ahead and create or add a new patient to our database. And as you can see as well, it is recognizing the person who is logged in. So it is using sessions to also recognize the account that was logged in. And we can also click on logout. So let's add a new patient, John Williams, create, and John Williams has been added. All right. Now let's log out, go back to patient list. Let's try and delete. Again, to delete, you must be logged in before you can actually go ahead and delete anything from the database. All right, so it's asking me if I want to delete, click on that, and that user has been deleted. All right, so that's our simple application. All right, you would have seen that ASP.NET and the different components available to us took away some of the work, right? Less coding, um, and we, in a matter of in less than 2 hours, we would have built out an application. All right. Now, again, I would say watch the video, rewatch the video if you need to, and go through the different steps to build out this application or a similar application, and just use it as practice. So the more you practice, the better you'll get at something. All right. All right. So that was us using ASP.NET, specifically the MVC framework, to build out our simple WebMed application. All right, so let's log out and log off. Right.